I've seen a lot of discourse about RuneScape recently, and I wanted to weigh in with my thoughts. It's not going to be anything about forestry or shooting stars or the Osmountains, Fang, or whatever the hot topic is at the moment. It's going to be about the general direction of the game. And to talk about that, I have to talk about what makes RuneScape, I guess, special. So there are two things that the game has. The first is player agency, player freedom. You get to choose what you want to do. It doesn't matter if you want to be like me and just click this tree over and over again for hundreds of hours, or if you want to kill a boss, if you want to, do any other piece of content in the game. The second thing that facilitates the first one is interconnected progression, right? I'm not just calling this red tree, right? I have a crystal axe on me, and it's charged with crystal shards. Oh, actually, it's just gonna run out of charges, so I'm gonna go recharge it. But yeah, and that's another system, right? I had to use Volcano to get it, and I have to sustain the charges by doing content in Thriftiness. And essentially what that means is that even though you can do whatever parts of the game you want to do, you eventually benefit from doing as many of them as is feasible for you. And so essentially it's a situation where, you have choices, but the more variety you choose to engage in, the more you ultimately end up benefiting. And that's the gameplay loop that a lot of people like in this game. And that's exemplified by, that being the early game content loop. And a lot of people just really like the early game in the game. They don't really like the late game. And that's fine. So, in the early game, essentially the loop that you're supposed to follow is you look at whatever quest you want to do next. You get the related quests done. You get the skill level requirements done. You get enough gear to fight the boss, and then you go and finish the quest. That's an intrinsic part of the game, and that's essentially what the game is supposed to be. It's supposed to go from when you start your account to when you finish the quest cape, and then once you finish the quest cape, you're left with all of these choices to do. You've unlocked the entire game, and at that point the progression isn't about essentially just trying to maximize the pieces of content you have, but rather it's about, trying to figure out what you like doing and then doing that. Now, the problem with this is that, that's not the whole story, right? Because, again, every single piece of content is interconnected, right? Even after the quest cape, someone needs to get a crystal tool seed to sell on the Grand Exchange. Someone needs to get elven teleport crystals, again, to sell on the Grand Exchange. And as such, player priorities at scale essentially mean that basically no matter how you specialize, the entire game is working together to essentially create a situation where, everyone's still working towards multiple pieces of content, and it's not feasible to just have okay, everyone goes and does the Inferno, right? Because if people are doing the Inferno with the Bofa, they need charges, right? So someone needs to go a few from elves. If you're using a blowpipe, you need darts and Zulrah skills, so someone needs to do Zulrah. If you're using a twisted bow, someone needs to do Chambers of Zerek to get that, and someone needs to go get the Dragon Arrow somewhere, and so on and so on. So the game is built in a way that no matter how much you scale the economy, and no matter how much any individual player specializes, as much of the game as possible is kept relevant in the macro scale. And that is incredibly fun, right? Because what that means on an individual level is no matter what piece of content you enjoy, you can just go and do that. And even if you don't particularly enjoy a piece of content, if no one does, you can still benefit from doing that, right? Like, for example, back when OSRS launched, no one really enjoyed runecrafting that much. So the people who did enjoy it could profit a lot off of making nature runes. And the people who didn't mind doing it could still make a lot of money off of nature runes, right? So the incentive structure of the game essentially always spreads people out, just because of supply and demand, right? And that's what makes the game fun. Now, as time has gone on, this hasn't become an even more popular way of playing, to put it like mildly. People don't want to just specialize into one part of the game. You don't want to be the guy who's stuck at Zultra. You don't want to be the guy who's stuck at Chambers of Sirik, or, any other piece of content. There are some exceptions. Some players choose to really specialize heavily into one piece of content, and that's really good for them, but that's not the predominant viewpoint. So you end up with this problem where players are essentially playing a game where specializing is the incentivized mode of playing, and they're refusing to do that. So once people get out of the quest cape grind, get into the mid game, and have to decide what to do, they kind of want to do everything. They want to experience the entirety of the game, even though the entire game isn't really meant to be experienced by a single person. There's just too much stuff to do realistically for a single person to do it all. And people just have been playing the game for a really long time. People's priorities have changed. So now it's like, okay, I want to do a bit of Zultra, I want to do a bit of Volcano, I want to do a bit of Guardians of the Rift. I want to go kill, Giant Mole. It's not just you're the guy who does this one thing 30 minutes every day, or however long you're playing as a child. You as a person, basically have this desire to just go out and, play as much of the game as possible. Do every single skill to level 99, get every single boss done on the collection log, get all of the Grandmaster combat achievements, finish all of the cosmetics in the game, and just all the stuff that comes along with that. And that's just kind of too much for a single person to do. So what jagex has been essentially doing over time is they've basically been okay, in the early game, or early days, right, back before old school RuneScape, they were okay, so some people really like woodcutting, so they're gonna get a special cape out of that, right? And then 6 years went by between when the fucking Wilderness and Free trade update came out and old school RuneScape came out, right? And in those 6 years, everyone who was playing the game at 12 years old was now 18 and in college, right? And they were playing a lot more than 30 minutes a day. They were playing the game for hours at a time. They were progressing really fast. And they were okay, so we're getting all of these cosmetic capes, but these cosmetic capes aren't really, doing it for us anymore. Can we get perks? Can we make these capes functional? Because we're doing it anyway, right? We're skilling. That's the name of the game. And I want to have it so when I get the woodcutting cape, or I get the crafting cape, or I get any of these particular types of capes, I can, actually benefit from them. Just sure, we already did it in RS3, can't be bad to do it in OSRS. So from there on, they bought the max cape, and they basically just rolled the skill cape perks into the max cape. And that was a situation of, hey, I put all of that effort into getting 99 in every single skill, and I want that to be useful, right? And so the players who were already playing the game, they can now have this useful item where they can, show off that they got all the 99s, and they can get some type of benefit from it. Now the problem is that if you weren't playing at the time, right? If you joined the game later, or if you started seriously playing later, now instead of being oh, look, there's something cool to get for my dedication, my achievements, it was a situation of, okay, I haven't chosen my playstyle yet. I haven't figured out what I really want to do. So this is a goal. This is something I can go for. I finished my quest cape. Now it's time to get the max cape, right? And somewhere around there, they also added elite diaries. I don't know the exact timeline on that, but it was a situation of okay, so I got my quest cape, time to get the diary cape for all of those benefits, and 10 time to get the max cape for all of those benefits. Now, obviously skilling wasn't a sustainable long-term endgame for RuneScape, and PvP wasn't, as popular as it was back in the day because people just kept getting better at it. And the situation then became okay, the next stage of the game is PvM. How do we make PvM feel good? How do we reward people for putting all of the time, energy, and effort into PvM? Now, PvM was pretty simple at that point. You just had the God Wars dungeon. It was like, okay, you can't really get that good at it. Like, you can flick God Wars, but you can't really improve, like, to an insane degree. So, they just gave pets to the bosses, right? Which are an RNG drop, but the RNG is influenced by your KC. The more KC you have, the more rolls you have, so the more likely you are to, get the item, right? So it was like, okay, you can go for pets. That's another goal that you can have if you're already PvMing, right? Because that was becoming the more popular thing to do. If you want to go to the God Wars dungeon, you can go there, you can get the drops, but also if you do enough kills, you have a pretty decent shot of getting this pet. And then as the game kept progressing, right, that wasn't enough anymore, right? Okay, so you get the achievement diary cape, you get the max cape, and then you start going for pets, right? But again, as a newer player, right, what that essentially means to you, or if you take the game seriously and start making like long-term goals, is there's a definitive gameplay loop, right, from your quest cape to the end game, which is getting pets. So they kept releasing more bosses, they kept releasing raids, and suddenly it wasn't anymore like a situation where, okay, you can get the useful items pretty fast, but if you want to get the cool rare pets, you're gonna have to spend a lot of time. It was a situation of like, okay, we're putting these rare rewards into the game with Chambers of Sirik. Everything is super insanely hard to get. They take a long time to obtain for any single person. So, have fun chasing the Twisted Bow or pieces of Ancestral or, any of the rare items like the Dragon Claws or the Dragon Hunter crossbow. And, people did. They were like, okay, there's a new raid out. I was gonna go do the new raid anyway, but now that the raid has these super rare rewards, I wanna get some of them. I wanna sell them for a lot of money and then use that money to work towards my other goals. So then you started getting people who were going for a Twisted Bow. Then the Inferno came out, and now it wasn't like tradable rewards that people were going for anymore. It was an untradable best in slot cape. And at that point the situation changed again, right? You were no longer going for untradable cosmetics or tradable items to sell. You were going for an untradable item that showed how skilled you were at the game. And again, at the time that was a perfect decision. If you were already good at PvM, you were like, okay, this will let me show off how good I am at PvM. This will let me just show every single other player that I've put in the work and I've gotten good at this piece of content. So again, more time goes by, more bosses, more pets, long grinds, and the combat achievements come out. And now it's a situation of like, okay, that's the actual end game. It's all about the Infernal Cape, it's all about getting an insane amount of money from raids, it's about doing the combat achievements, right? So you get your quest cape, you get your achievement diary cape, you get the max cape, you get all of the expensive items, you get the Infernal Cape, and you go do the combat achievements, and then you hunt for pets, right? There's just more and more layers being added onto it. And around that time, people also started getting really into the collection log. So jagex was like, okay, you know what we should do? We should support this feature more in the game. We should make the the collection log interface more readable. It should have more features, and it should be pretty prominent on your character profile, so you can show other people how much effort you put into the collection log. You can have your log numbers, and then the clan system came out, and then you could basically show all of your friends how many collection log slots you have every time you get a new slot in the collection log, right? And at that point it became a situation of, hey, you get your quest cape, you get your achievement diary cape, you get your max cape, you get the expensive items, you go do the Inferno for the untradable reward, you go do the combat achievements, and then you start working for pets and the collection log, right? This loop of basically guided progression where everything feeds into each other has basically extended to the point where no one will be able to complete it, right? Because all of the previous goals were kind of doable, but even kind of doable at the time, even though they were really hard. Getting the max cape, people already had it at the time it released. Getting all pets, again, when the pets were released, wasn't an impossible grind. Casey got pretty close pretty fast, and then he got stuck on the Bloodhound Pit. Finishing the combat achievements, again, you can do that as a person, right? You just need to play the game a lot, get the expensive items, and then just do them for a couple of months, and you'll probably be able to, if you pay for some boosts and you work on your own player skills. And now the discussion has basically shifted further away from, what's something that I should be doing in the game, towards, I'm gonna start working on the collection log, which is something that's impossible to ever complete for any human who's alive right now. And I feel like that loses a lot of what makes the game fun, because even though you're parceling out this content that's really fun for people at the time, right? People wanted the collection log because they liked collecting items from different bosses, and they wanted to be able to show it off. They wanted to be able to, essentially go over like what piece of content they've done. At this point, right, if you're a newer player, you joined after 2019, or you started getting serious about the game after 2019, it seems like a really valuable piece of progression. It seems like something that you can seriously push and advance in, and by doing the collection log, you're gaining like various benefits to your account indirectly. There's no in-game incentive for the collection log yet, but following the past trends that, the game has had, I wouldn't be surprised if, there was one at some point, where maybe you don't need to get that many slots. Maybe if you get 800 collection log slots or something, or half the collection log done, you get some benefit, basically, And I think that's a incredibly bad direction for the game in general. I think that all of these decisions, while they were the right decision at the time, essentially destroyed something about the game. So even though the Infernal Cape, I think still is healthy for the game, I think it's still a good thing to do, I think it didn't set a good precedent, because after that point, untradeable best in slot was something that's on the table. And now player progression is less about choosing what you want to do, right? You can't craft runes anymore to get every piece of best in slot gear. You actually have to PVM to get that, right? And even though PVM is the most popular thing to do, I don't know if that's necessarily the correct direction, With all of that set aside, how does this make the game not fun? How does this make the game kind of a chore for people? And the answer to that comes mostly down to psychology, because players don't play the game based on, no previous experiences. They don't enjoy the game in a vacuum. They go into the game with, other games they've played, other life experiences they might have had, their own history of the game, and they have some specific patterns. One of these patterns is, for example, people don't like selling their gear. Whenever jagex releases a new piece of content that has a side grade, people don't want to buy the side grade if the other option is better, or if the side grade is slightly more versatile or useful than another option they can have, people will go for the other option. A good example of this is something like the Guardian boots and the Primordial boots. The Guardian boots are pretty close to as, useful as the Primordial boots are, but they're just very slightly worse. And that means that Primordial boots are worth like 25 mil, Guardian boots are worth like 2.5 mil, right? And, other things of this nature just keep happening in the game. And for example, with the collection log, right? The prices of implings have gone up a lot, because now people are attaching value to collection log slots. And that means you're willing to buy implings even when you're not making money off of doing clues. So doing clues went from something that was profitable, because most people didn't really want to do a whole clue for, maybe 2 to 3k profit, to being something that's very unprofitable, because people, want to get the collection log slots, and that has value attached to it. And the same applies to every other aspect of the game. So for example, skilling. Even when skilling isn't profitable, that doesn't mean it's not valuable. The value is just attached to achievement diaries, the max cape, and the various in-game benefits you get from skilling. And the cumulative value of all of those things is probably up there into billions. So if you wanted to buy an account that had 99 in all skills, that's probably going to run you billions, even though that's illegal against the terms of service and they don't condone it. But there is a degree of value in there. Even if the bank is completely empty, even if the account has nothing else done, essentially, if it has 99 in all skills, it's worth billions. And the same essentially goes for every other piece of content in the game. Just because of, again, these untradeable rewards, like the Zuckhelm, for example, people are willing to spend a lot of money for combat achievements for boosting. So, for example, the 8-man TOA task isn't really valuable by itself, right? And it's not something that you would pay to do. But the Zuckhelm is both prestigious and genuinely useful in the game. So paying someone like 4 bill or something, I don't remember the exact number, for that specific combat task becomes something that's kind of tenable. It becomes something that people can start to consider. Because if that's the last thing they don't have done, and they don't want to wait months to get a team together, maybe it's worth paying a booster. And the same goes again for collection logs. Let's just look at the price of Implings. So my concern with the game isn't that it's easier to AFK, or the game balance is bad, or, whatever concerns people have. Like, I'm not really that worried that the two-handed axe makes trees 10% more XP, which makes woodcutting roughly, I guess, like 8% faster, because you're using the crystal axe instead of the infernal axe, and so on and so on and so on. Like, that's not something that I really care about that much. What I care about is the incentive structures that got us to this point, and where they can go in the future. Because I don't think this is sustainable. Because we've already hit the point of the collection log, and that's basically infinite. And now people have been talking about the completionist cape, and that's obviously going to be a goal that's somewhere between getting the max cape and starting to pet hunt or go for the Grandmaster combat achievements, or the super expensive gear upgrades as a full set, right? You're probably getting the comp cape before you have both the Shadow and the T-bow in your account, but you're probably getting it after you have one of those two items, like just game balance wise. And that type of progression concerns me, because even though right now it's already pretty hard to do what you want in the game because of all of these incentive systems where you're rewarded for doing things you don't like, right? If you're an endgame player, you're rewarded for doing forestry because it gives you 20 collection log slots. Or if you're a skiller, you're rewarded for doing PVM because it gives you all of these benefits for the Zuckhelm, or not the Zuckhelm, whatever the elite combat achievement helmet is, the Chat helm. I think that, yeah. If you're a PVMer, you're getting rewarded for skilling because you get the max cape and you get all of these untradeable rewards. And essentially, this isn't just a thing that pushes people out of their comfort zone. This is something that makes people genuinely uncomfortable with playing the game. And they kind of seem to like it. Because again, it comes down to player psychology. You want to have your efforts be rewarded, and you want all of these items in the game that essentially make it so you're not wasting your time when you're trying to do as much as possible in the game. And I don't know if there's an answer to this, but I think there are some things that can be done to make it less intrusive, I think, to the overall gameplay experience. I think this is something that jagex should start addressing, and I think this is the best solution for all of these controversies we've been having lately. So, for example, I think instead of TOA scaling to 85 mining, it should maybe cap out at 75. I think instead of chambers scaling to 99s in all skills, it should scale up to level 80 in all skills. And I think there should be alternatives to the crafting cape. I think there should be alternatives to every single elite diary reward that's useful. Like, for example, the Calphite Queen shortcut. I don't think you should have to do the elite diary to get that. I think maybe you should be able to just buy that. But with the elite diary, maybe you get some type of small benefit. I don't know. Maybe you get one more inventory space. maybe you need to have like a special tool with you get from a quest that you need to recharge your GP that lets you use the shortcut. Something like that. I think all of these really useful rewards should be parceled out to players at slightly inferior but still very useful in slightly inferior but still very useful variants. And I think that would go a long way to solving the problem. Another example is the benefit from elite combat achievements to superior spawning. Now, I think this might be a bit controversial, but I think that benefit, like the extra chance of superior spawning, should be some benefit you get from some Slayer-related activity. Maybe something like, if you kill superiors, instead of getting like, whatever you get right now, you would also get like a type of superior fragment or whatever. And once you have enough of those, after like maybe 20 mil of Slayer XP on average, you can just buy that reward with those or something like that. It doesn't have to be in any of the forms I'm describing, but I think there should be alternatives, essentially. And of course, once you have the reward, you can use those fragments to maybe work towards an imbued heart, or, something like that. Solve two problems with one update, I guess. And I think that's a way better approach to the game, to not incentivize people to give into, I guess, their inherently kind of destructive ways of engaging with the game. And I know, again, as a player, you have this compulsion to do everything in the game, and that's fine. You can go and do that at your own leisure, essentially. But I think once you take that impulse and you start rewarding that like really intensely, there's a slight problem with that, and I think it makes the way people engage with the game very unhealthy. And that's demonstrated by how often people burn out and just stop playing. Because again, the incentive structures in place don't encourage them to do the parts of the game they like, but rather to encourage them to do every part of the game, regardless of how fun they find it. And I think that's something that needs to be discussed more. I think that's something that there should be solutions to, and I'm really hoping that jagex essentially, starts addressing these issues eventually, because players sure aren't. Players will be really happy at the moment that they're getting rewarded for what they're doing, if what they're doing is basically, doing the entire game. And even though that's really nice in the short term, in the long term, it's not gonna be something that's good for the game, in my opinion.